Great. Michael Neill, Suicidal Ideation. From around the age of 13, every time I was in a stressful situation, and pretty much daily from the age of 17, the thought would come to mind that life would be a whole lot easier if I stopped participating completely. That thought, which I came to learn was called the suicidal ideation, was not as much of a problem as you might think. I had stuff to do, classes to go to, and friends to hang out with so much of the time that I didn't have time to think about my thinking. But it was always on in the background, and when it got quiet on the outside, it would get really noisy in my head. Sounds like he's just printing out his TED Talk, but it's worth repeating. Then, when I was 19, I had an experience I now know as a psychotic break from reality, where it felt as though my body was being sucked out of a fourth floor dormitory window by a giant vacuum cleaner. Terrified, I grabbed onto the wall of my room and phoned the suicide hotline, only to be answered by a busy signal. Even then, being sucked out the window by a giant vacuum cleaner from hell, I found that funny. I cannot imagine what anyone would have said to me that would have done more for me than that busy signal. The ridiculousness of the situation made me laugh out loud, and it popped me out of my head long enough for me to phone a friend to come get me and take me elsewhere so I could be safe for the night. Eventually, I fell asleep, and when I woke up the next morning, I realized something that was quite profound. I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't want to die. In fact, I so didn't want to die that I had used every ounce of strength I had to stay in that room when everything felt like I was being pulled out of the window. And that was the first time I realized that just because you have a thought in your head, it doesn't mean it's your thought. It doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that there's a thought in your head. Although the suicide thought continued to pop up regularly for several more years, that night it lost all its power over me. It became obvious to me that it only ever popped up when I was feeling overwhelmed with stress. Like a steam kettle whistling to relieve the trapped pressure inside, my mind was doing it the best it could to relieve the pressure I was feeling inside me, offering up an escape fantasy in the form of ending my life. Sounds like cutting to me. Because I wasn't scared of it anymore, it passed quicker and quicker. Better still, I began to feel a kind of peace inside me that was like a long forgotten friend pointing me toward a deeper dimension of life. Years later, I had another experience that reinforced that insight. I was drinking a beer, watching a video of a talk given by Sid Banks. At one point during the talk, he said, "Every human being is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it." Beer came squirting out of my nose, and I burst into fits of laughter because somehow I knew that despite all my years of therapy, depression, and suicidal ideation, it was true. As I later wrote, quote, "For Sid to say that mental health was natural went against everything I'd learned and taught in my first forays into the world of self-help. Yet I could instantly see the truth of it. After all, babies don't need therapy. And while I can honestly say I remember what it felt like to be in the I can't remember and while I can't honestly say I remember what it felt like to be in the womb, I knew from watching my own kids grow up that other than during periods of physical discomfort, they lived in a pretty continual state of mental well-being for the first few years of their lives. In seeing the original grace of my innate mental health, I felt as though the burden of nearly 40 years of struggle had been lifted off my shoulders. Does this mean I've always felt good in the time since I had that initial realization? Of course not. Just because well-being is our nature doesn't mean we're always going to feel wonderful. We can get caught up in the whirlwind of our thinking at any moment, and in so doing, become instantly subjected to every emotional color in the spectrum. But to say that means that well-being is temporary would be like saying that the presence of heavy clouds is indicative of the disappearance of the sun. Actually, the sun is there, even in our darkest hour. It's just that sometimes there's something between us and our clear seeing. In the same way, our mental health is undiminished by our moments of cloudy thinking and feeling. Uh, Somebody can take it from here.
I'll go. Interestingly, I've found that for most people, once they begin to realize their own mental health, they become interested in helping the people around them wake up to theirs. And I'm no exception to that rule. A few years after this realization, I heard that one of my best friends from college had committed suicide. We had lost touch years earlier, so I was unaware that he had been struggling. I decided to write him the letter I would have written had I known what he was going through. I'm sharing it here in case it's helpful to you or anyone you know who may be going through your own private struggles with thoughts of suicide. I titled it A Permanent Solution to a Temporary Problem. Hey, friend, I hear you're struggling at the moment, that you've been struggling for a long time. As you were one of the first people to see something worth saving in me as I was coming out of my own years of depression, I thought I'd share a little bit about what I've come to see since that time. First and foremost, you are not alone. You might be lonely as hell, but that kind of hell only exists in your mind. The world's like a Warsash ink blot. It looks like Dante's Inferno when the elevator is going down, and like a pretty girl with a twinkle in her eye on the way back up. You are so loved, my friend, and it really doesn't matter what you've done to try to make people hate you. We used to talk about the world and its wife, our hopes and dreams of fame, fortune, and family. It took me a long time to realize that fame and fortune are temporary solutions to permanent problems, and that our true family is nearly 8 billion people strong. Like the human condition seems pretty damn inescapable. Everything that's born will die. Everything that comes into form will one day disappear back into the void from which it came. But there's something in us which never dies because it was never born. It's the spark inside us which can sit quietly and untended for years and then burst at any moment, into flame in any moment. I think that spark is made of love, not just the love that I feel for Nina or that you feel for your kids, but the love that's ever present inside all of us. Some people would probably call it God, not sure where you got to with that one. But even without the label, the presence of something beautiful unfolding behind the scenes remain. Pass. Oh, sorry, you did that. Okay, I'll go to the end. Love
Well,
never dies
oh,
because it's always been here. We're made from it. It's in our DNA. And the only reason we don't feel it so much of the time is because it gets sicklied over by the pale cast of thought. Hamlet got it wrong. He wasn't miserable because his father was dead, or his mother betrayed him, or his girlfriend didn't understand his pain. He was miserable for the same reason you and I get miserable. We start to believe that the world we're living in inside our heads is real and permanent, and it's never going to get any better than the way it feels right now. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does our thinking. We wake up from every dream sooner or later, no matter how horrible of a nightmare it may seem while we're in it. And the moment we do, it's like it never happened. You don't have to make right what goes wrong in your dreams. You just have to do your best when you wake up. Opportunities may pass you by, but you will never run out of possibilities. I love you, and I can't and wouldn't want to make your decisions for you. I hope you find that love inside, and I hope you choose to keep the dream alive. But whatever choice you make, please know that I love you, and my life is so much better for having had you in it. With all my love, Michael.
so touching,
Yeah.
so touching. Wow. Will you put the link, the the URL link in the chat, Wendy? I'll put it in our Facebook group when or actually in the YouTube recording. Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you for thinking of his awesomer TED Talk. Woo! Any comments, anything you want to share, thoughts? I mean, that was a big one. Yeah, it just makes me think about what a split second decision that is for people who, actually do go through with suicide.
You know what it made me think of? Someone I used to work with, and she was a friend, not in the, say, first two circles of friends, but we had a nice relationship and we would see each other from time to time. She grew up in the town I grew up in, but we didn't go to the same schools. And so I met her at work as an adult. We just had a nice connection, would see each other. And then at one point, I guess she had moved. I don't know if her number changed, but um, I just lost touch. And I knew she had depression and I knew she believed she had a chemical imbalance. Kind of wonder what happened to her as a kid. Her father was really hard to live with. And so, couple few years go by and I kind of gave up on trying to find her. And she also had electroshock therapy and her memory was affected very profoundly, because I would make reference to something when we talked and she had no idea what I was talking about. It shocked me. I didn't say anything. I didn't say, oh my goodness. But anyway, she suffered from depression. And one day I saw her obituary or her death notice. I was I couldn't even. I just couldn't even. And my thought since that time has been suicide. I was so blown away. I couldn't even contact the family. Her mom may since have died. Um, but I knew her where her brother lived. I could reach out to. I should need to reach out to him now because I assumed it was suicide. But I was so blown away. I for like a year I couldn't even think of reach. I was just blasted. Um, but anyway, so that's what I thought. And in all of this, it's only thought. What? What? And of course, I'm sure she didn't have access to any of this. And that's what I was thinking when I was reading this. It's just thought.
It's just, and it's everything. Thought is, it's one thought that says, yeah, this is the moment I'm gonna go in the garage and end it all or whatever, hang myself. That's one thought bubble. But the ability to make sense of the world, thought, there's no just in front of that, right? It's everything. It's everything. The power to create how the world looks to us is completely internal. And somebody, I don't know, I can't speak for your friend, but like Michael Neill said, there was a giant vacuum cleaner ready to take my heart out of my chest, and I didn't want it to happen. That looked real, and that was the power of thought. And, you know, he found it interesting that I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to call the suicide hotline and the line's busy. How completely ludicrous is that, that it would have a busy
Mhm.
signal? How completely silly. And he was able to transition. His thoughts went away from staring into the deep and I can't wait for the relief to the suicide hotlines. Thank God I'm not really ready, like whatever, So it is one thought away from utopia, if you will. Everybody is. So it's just one thought, meaning it doesn't take much to shift. And yet it's so powerful. Thought is hugely powerful. So anyway, that just struck me when you were sharing. And you know, the misery that somebody that's living in lifelong depression, you wonder what happened in her childhood, etc. And I'm sure Lori and Elaine can speak much more eloquently to this because I don't counsel people on a daily basis who are living with depression on the regular. But there's something inside of me that makes me want to take their little chin and go, look over here.
Mm.
Look over here. Stop
The
looking at,
remarkable thing
stop,
about it
as I've said
is,
in what, stop picking at the wound. You keep taking and it bleeds again. Of course, when you pick, but if you leave it alone, there is some healing that can happen that's natural to us, you know? And maybe go out in the sunshine and put your arm out in the sunshine. Maybe put your mental health out in the sunshine, you know? Anyway, I'm blathering, but
what's so remarkable about that, Wendy, and everybody is, the old school of psychology would do that. They would actually, whether it was through EFT, NLP, CBT, they would move the person's chin, so to speak, to use your metaphor. And what I found with all my depressed clients, we'll have a laugh and I'll say, and how do you feel now?
Mhm.
And then they realize, oh, but then the tendency is like they want to go right back into looking for a depressing thought.
like,
You
oh
know what
yeah,
the
I,
interesting
I'm
thing
not
is?
taking my illness seriously enough. I'm not, I forgot for a moment and I laughed, but really I am actually quite sick and quite debilitated. So
Right,
bad
go
me for
there.
being a bad
Yeah.
patient, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I f- I
fascinating, right,
forgot.
Elaine? How,
Yes.
people don't, so many people in the world who, if only they knew that we are experiencing our own thinking every single second, even when we're having a ball and having a good time and enjoying
Yeah.
ourselves and loving life, that's still coming to us from thought and consciousness.
Yes.
Mhm.
And when people, I mean, look at all of us. There was a time when I didn't know this, and I know the same is true for the rest of you. What a difference it makes to know that we can only experience our own thinking, even in relationships, right? Because I work mostly, some individuals, but a lot of relationships. People will blame their partner for their own feelings,
Yes.
right, Elaine?
Yes.
Mm.
And, if you're upset with your partner for picking their nose in front of you, you could say, can you please turn around when you do that? Instead of, you know, screaming and yelling at them how terrible you are and how could you possibly do that? Because people do things without thinking. That they're not realizing that they're in their own thought created world. I need something's in my nose and I have to get it out.
As
Funny
opposed
stuff that
to
comes
you,
to us.
you know how much it bugs me when you pick your nose and you're just doing it to piss me off and you're doing it because you're a gross human being. Like, yeah, that's a productive conversation. That's a productive link to somebody that you care about, ostensibly, if they're in therapy with you, you know? So yeah.
So true, isn't it? That, and the whole concept of taking offense is totally wiped out of my life. I cannot imagine taking offense to anything anybody has to say to me.
Mm.
I remember years ago, and he didn't die of suicide. He died young though, from AIDS years ago. Wonderful guy. He created a curriculum. Self-esteem is for everyone. And he would use the example. He would say, well, if somebody said to you, you have pink polka dots on your face. Well, you obviously know that's not true. So, or maybe you would look in the mirror to see if you have measles or something, but that would not upset you. How dare you tell me I have pink polka dots on my face?
Mhm.
And then you take it a step further and you realize that measles, schmeasles, mirror, no mirror, it's still what we're thinking. in the end. How we take it in, how we think about the thing, the person, the comment, the traffic, whatever. Yeah, man. Woo! Yeah. We're always one thought away. I mean, there's a whole organization run by Aaron Turner and his wife, and I think Mark Gleason is part of that also. And it's called One Thought. We're always one thought away. If you can find that thought, meaning you just look in a nicer direction, knowing, you've got the knowing that you're not going to be there in the pits forever. Using Mary's shoulder is a great example, right? You're out of the cast, not the cast, the sling, and you have more freedom of movement. You can use that arm now. It's the same with our emotional life. We're never in one place forever.
Mhm.
And it can feel that way. I remember when I had like sciatica. Looking back, I don't know what it was, but I was like 31, 32, and I was immobilized with low back pain. I mean, it was bad. And I was visiting my dad. My mom had died by then, and I was visiting my dad for, I don't know, Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, one of those holidays. And I was, it was happy to have the family over, and Wendy, being the single daughter, would come home and do the cooking kind of thing. And I could still feel myself walking into the kitchen and picking up the potato peeler and holding and one peel, another peel. And going, okay, the half a potato, I'll come back, and I'd have to go and rest. And I was like, my life is over. I'm an old woman. I'm 31, and it will never, ever, ever be better than this. I will always have to take 8 hours to peel 5 pounds of potato. I mean, like I was bereft. I was bereft. And just feeling so sorry for myself and so sure that it was permanent. But I was only 31. I wasn't now even if I had a week of back pain where I couldn't peel a potato right now, I would be like, this too shall pass. That's the beauty of 67 years, almost 67 years on the planet. No, this been 67. It's going to be soon to be 60. I don't know how to do the math, but anyway,
No, it's going to be 60. We're in our 67th year.
we're in our 67th year. Thank you. Mary's born a day ahead of me. She's June 23rd, 1958. I'm
I'm
June
older.
24th,
Am I
1950.
wiser, do you think? Or
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Absolutely. But anyway, just that feeling of permanence and confidence. And I loved what Michael Neill said in the writing. He said something about the inversion that we have about the storm clouds and the sun. We think the storm clouds are the reality, but they're the things that are passing through. The sun is always there, 24/7. It's just shining on a different part of the planet because the way that we rotate, right? But the sun is always there, and it's just the clouds that are temporary. I forget how we worded it. We could go back, but anyway, I really appreciated that reminder. And it reminded me, I was somewhere I heard this week, I think it was, that just because we have high blood pressure doesn't mean that we need to have our heart removed, right? It's sort of like if we have depression, doesn't mean we need to medicate the brain or get shockwave or whatever. You know, there are times when you have, and high blood pressure, doesn't mean you need your heart removed or a new heart or something like that. Anyway, I'm not really quoting it correctly, but something like that. But it struck me not very deeply, evidently, because I can't repeat it quite right. But
Yeah, it's like going down the rabbit hole, right? You're at the edge, and if people use their feelings as, an internal GPS, they'll know when they're at the edge of the rabbit hole. But what most people, and certainly I did, was go deeper into the bad thinking, the negative thinking. And I would look for evidence in the world of why I'm not good enough. You see, he got an A and I got a B. And, I would I think that's common for the brain to try to figure it out. Why are you not good enough? Well, here's the evidence, you know. And what a relief, though, when you feel that terrible feeling, I'm not going down that rabbit hole by going into what I'm thinking. I'm going to look for a nicer, better feeling. I'm just staying out of that rabbit hole because it's so easy to get caught up
Didn't we
and
talk
spiral
about that
down.
yesterday? Didn't we talk about that yesterday on the audio? That wasn't that what Sid was saying yesterday about go toward the nicer feeling, because that's really what we're built of.
Mhm.
And the negativity or the wringing of your hands emotionally or in real life or whatever, don't keep chasing after that, because that's not where that's a design flaw, to keep looking in the negative direction and keep looking in the design what your design was meant to do, and you keep you know
Like the
ignoring
babies
it.
that don't need therapy. Like, I love that Michael said that. Babies don't need therapy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So obvious. It's only until we start thinking against ourselves and find fault with the world and fault with our parents that we start feeling crappy.
And we think we have to, it's so funny when, babies cry over something or, have a tantrum. It's just so funny. It's like, oh yeah, I have days like that, but we're not allowed to express. It's like, why not?
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Exactly. And it's very fleeting, you change my diaper, I'm all set.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I called
They
attention.
get
I
their
called
needs met.
attention. Yeah, I called attention. I'm starving. Oh, a bottle. Great. Thank you. Now I'll take a nap. And I remember, this is very similar. A good friend of mine years ago, I had surgery. I had, my gallbladder out or something like that. And she said, after your surgery, I want you to go home. She goes, you have a cat, right? And I said, yes, I do. At the time I did. She said, I want you to do what the cat does when the cat does it. So if the cat goes over and lays and stretches in the sunshine, I want you to find some sunshine and go stretch. If the cat's asleep, I want you to sleep. If the cat's eating, I want you to eat. If the cat's going in the cat box, you go pee. And so what do cats do 23 out of 24 hours a day? Right. So it was great. It was a great, just kind of like what you just said. Why can't I cry if I want to cry? Why can't I
Yeah.
express myself like a baby does and get my needs met and move on?
Mhm.
It works for them.
That's right. What's that quote at the end of your webinar? Your emails, Wendy,
Fine.
about from Sid. If people could just learn to
Yeah,
be
it's
okay
a
with
it's a
their
modification it's a
experiences.
modification of Sid's quote. Oop,
Oh, I thought you had the exact Sid quote.
no, it's not the exact one. It's my spin on it. But yeah,
You
that's
should
what
have the
Sid said. He
exact
said
one.
if everybody learned to not be afraid of their own thinking, their own thoughts, it would just
Their
and
own
Michael said that several
experience.
times in his TED talk. You're not afraid of the thing, you're afraid of what you're thinking of the thing.
That's
Right.
right.
Like the picture of the monster. So I notice you're not all running out of the room screaming. That's probably good, because it isn't a real monster.
It's
But it's
just
my daughter's,
suicidal thoughts.
yeah, it's
But
my daughter's representation of a monster. And to her it looks scary, but to you and I, not so much.
I loved when he said it's just suicidal thoughts. It doesn't mean anything. That's the bottom line, is when we see that what we think doesn't mean anything. It's the meaning we put on what we're thinking. And where does that meaning come from? Our own thinking. Conditioned through the years. You know, oh, I just had a suicidal thought. That's really bad. That's good. I should go see a doctor. You know,
Yeah.
as opposed to, well, that's interesting. Where did that come from? You know,
Really, really. Or, well, I remember I don't know, take it for whatever it's worth, but years ago I had a mental breakdown or whatever, nervous breakdown. And I was at my desk at the office at Northeastern University, and I looked around and I looked at my computer and all the emails that were flying in and all the paperwork that needed to be, and I pushed away from my desk and I go, no, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow. I don't want to. I don't want to. And my nurse brain said, well, that's a very interesting thought. So I called my husband and my sister. I said, guess what I just thought? That I'd rather not wake up tomorrow. And so they said, you just sit tight, we'll come get you. And they brought me to the emergency room and I got evaluated and I didn't have to spend the night, but they said, yep, you're definitely depressed and and you need a few weeks off of work. So go take the Wellbutrin and go see the CBT therapist and stop working for a little while. And that passed, it did. It took a couple of months of whatever. I mean, I don't remember the exact time, but it visited upon me and it didn't. And I'm just remembering this. This was very painful. About a week or two, I was sitting in my backyard right here, and I kept calling my sister Martha that lives on the North Shore, and I said, and she wasn't answering, and so finally I called her daughters, and I was home depressed or whatever, I was on medication, I was on a hiatus from work, and she was the one that she's my sister, the nurse, and she brought me to the emergency room, and they said, we didn't want to tell you, but my mother had a heart attack about 48 hours after you went to the hospital. She got so worked up
wow.
about me. Yep. Talk about
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
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 It took a while, we just, you know, we've talked about it a little bit, but at the time, it was hard for me to think what I did. But I must have had enough self-awareness to say, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And I was going through my own thing. And maybe if the roles had been reversed, I would have had the heart attack. I don't know.
Right.
Um, but the power of she was I was close to losing my Wendy and I can't take it. Whatever, I don't know. But
Mhm.
it was
We live in a world of thought.
yeah.
Do we all have another minute? Because I just wanted to share something with you, and I know Elaine usually has a
Oh,
client, but
I
I
actually
think
have
you
to
have.
I have to make a patient call, so I will take your leave.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. Yesterday, when we were on the teachings of Sydney Banks, I don't know, Zia may not have mentioned this. She may not have, we may not have been talking about anger, the word anger. You might have been gone already because we stayed on a little more. I took a note, I wrote it down. In some countries, anger is not even a word. I had heard this a long time ago. There's an island off of the coast of Japan. They don't have a word for anger and they don't experience anger. This is hearsay. I don't know. I don't know anybody. But she said there are countries that if you translate what they say about anger into English, it comes out anger is here, anger has arrived.
Wow.
Like rather than I'm angry. No, that's not who you are. Anger is here. Anger has arrived
And it can leave.
and it
Right.
leaves.
And
Exactly.
it's here because it was let in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
So
interesting, huh? I'm gonna stop the recording.